Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Woodland, the creator of the Miracles course. If you didn't know that, you're probably in the wrong place. Welcome to the first session of the spring quarter. Well, let's begin just by setting an intention to start. You might even want to close your eyes for this for a minute. Take a couple of deep, full breaths. And just take a moment to let your body and your mind relax. Just breathe in deeply and exhale just as deeply. Breathe yourself present, fully present in your body, present in this moment. And just imagine that you've left reality as you've known it, outside the room, and entered a space where anything is possible. And imagine your highest heart's desires are not only possible, but now within reach. And you don't even need to believe this. Just imagine what it would feel like if you did. And let excitement begin to well up. Let anticipation grow. And hold the intention for everyone here that miracles are now unfolding. So, I want to welcome our new students, our returning students, and our guests who are just attending for the evening. We have one of these live classes every week for enrolled students, and the first class of each quarter we open up to anyone who'd like to sit in and audit. Now usually a lot of us have webcams on so we can see each other, which we like to do. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with this program, let me just tell you a little bit about it. It's really a very comprehensive program of weekly spiritual lessons and exercises that are all designed for living a miraculous life. And the format includes a weekly written lesson that you can access online on the student's website, live classes with me every week, as well as monthly live classes with Reverend Deb Taramani, and a lot of opportunities for interaction with other students and faculty. One of the things that's really different about this course is that it works with a circular curriculum. And this circular curriculum uses the seasons as a template for the whole of human experience, just because the way the cycles of nature just so beautifully portray every aspect of a growing cycle and every aspect of our human journey. And the darker seasons that we're just starting to come out of, the darker seasons of fall and winter, those are really a time for pulling in, for internalizing, for releasing our attachment to the material world, and for birthing things within, rather than pushing to make things happen in the outer world. I love, while we were just chatting before we began the recording, somebody shared that she had done work with me before, and she'd always attended in the winter months, and she wondered why had she not seen results manifest, and she realized, because she was only attending winter, she didn't get to spring. And winter really is the time when we do a lot of inner work. We give a lot of emphasis to spiritual renewal and listening to inner guidance and spiritual empowerment, as well as dreaming the dreams that will then bring into manifestation in the spring and summer. You know, it's like everything has its season. So the last quarter of the winter quarter ended with a whole month dedicated to love and relationships, and including some exercises for manifesting the relationships that will best serve us. So that's where we've been, and now that we're moving into the light-filled seasons of spring and summer, the emphasis of the Course now becomes one of growing our dreams in tangible form. And we address here the metaphysical principles of manifestation and opening to prosperity, among other things. And in this circular curriculum, the work of one season just naturally lays the foundation for the next. And it's a program that's really about transforming life, not just creating a result. Although most students do see results manifest all along the way. But think about it. The straightforward path to a result is a linear one. And a line to a destination tends to draw our mind back and forth, from the starting point in the past to our imagined ending point in the future. And by contrast, a circle takes us around and around without a beginning or an ending point. And this course doesn't have a beginning or an end. That's why all students are doing the same lesson at the same time, no matter when they started. And a circular path just very naturally leads us to bend and adjust to its curves. It gives everything a season, but it doesn't stop anywhere. All of which makes it much more about the journey and the present moment than about the destination. And this kind of journey is one that tends to deliver a lot more than we imagined, not just the limits of what we can currently imagine. And that's a big difference between what I think of as miracle making, which is what we're about here, and simple manifesting techniques. Because I think a big reason that a lot of the popularized techniques on manifesting and working with the law of attraction really don't work as predictably as advertised is that they emphasize creating isolated results, and they don't necessarily deeply address context. To use a gardening analogy, they teach how to plant the seed, but they don't always teach how to cultivate the soil. And planting a seed doesn't guarantee that the seed will grow. And a seed does have a truly amazing ability to take on a life of its own and transform into something huge, all in its own steam. But at the same time, for that miraculous process to kick in, the conditions need to be right. The soil, the climate, all kinds of environmental factors have to be just right. So this quarter, the spring quarter of the Miracles course, begins the work of manifesting our heart's desires by metaphorically cultivating the soil, by addressing some of the foundational aspects of personality and behavior that make us more effective in achieving our goals. And this includes things like clarifying intention and developing will, cultivating faith, breaking disempowering habits, changing limiting behaviors, cultivating our passion for life, and awakening intuition, and other things. A lot of things that together comprise the elements of personal mastery. And this is going to make the manifesting work we do toward the very end of spring and into summer a lot more effective. So March is it's a transitional month during which winter really does give way to spring, and the hibernating and the preserving of inner warmth that characterize winter soon will transform into a more outward phase of activity and of visible growth. And there's a quickening taking place as light builds and finally, at the spring equinox, overtakes the darkness for the first time in 6 months. As the world around us goes through this dramatic shift in emphasis from dark to light, it makes sense that we would feel it in some profound, even if subliminal way. And I'll tell you, even in Minnesota, in this horrible winter where we've had 3 whole months of below zero temperatures, we didn't really get out of the below zeros until this week. I've been noticing the difference in light. Even here, I think we can feel it. And just as the dark depth of winter urges us to turn our attention inward and to dream, with the event of spring, we start to wake up. We come out of ourselves. We think about planting new seeds, both literally and metaphorically. And yet, at the same time, in a lot of places, this can really be the ugliest of seasons. Melting snow or spring rains can give rise to this whole season of mud. And in climates where snow has covered the ground for months, suddenly everything dead and brown is exposed. All the trash that didn't get cleaned up off of people's lawns is exposed. Mm-hmm. And as a metaphor for inner growth, this is the phase where we compare the beautiful visions we've had during the winter season of dreaming to the outer reality of our lives. And we see how much work is ahead of us if we want to make our dreams real. I can give my own example. What I've been dreaming about all winter is moving to California, which is what Bill and I plan to do in the next few months. So I've been California dreaming, literally. And what I have to look forward to now is a season of packing. And, all the dirt in the corners, that gets exposed when you move everything out of a space, that's where I am. It's literally that in-between place. Not quite there, really time to do all the hard work. And that's really the essence of this season. This is a really good time, right between dreaming and planting. It's a good time to be very, very careful and mindful in our preparation to ensure that the growth that's about to happen is really going to produce the garden we want, rather than some unintended mass of weeds. And in this metaphor for life, the seeds we plant and the gardens they become, for better or worse, start with our thinking, start with our thoughts. As Erwin Schrödinger, who is one of the early pioneers of modern physics, pointed out, I'm quoting him here, he said, "Consciousness is that by which this world first becomes manifest, by which indeed we can quite calmly say it first becomes present, that the world consists of elements of consciousness." End of quote. It's easy to deny this connection between consciousness and the material world. We often entertain thoughts so mindlessly. We toss them about recklessly through our words because just like a handful of little teeny itsy bitsy seeds sitting in the palm of our hand or sprinkled on the earth, they just seem so inconsequential. They seem like little bits of nothing. But any gardener knows the potential for some little teeny piece of nearly nothing to grow the, gigantic zucchinis of late summer. Or alternately for the, tender, lovely little greenery of early spring to become an unmanageable garden of weeds in a few months if left unchecked. So what if we looked at our own thoughts this way? Well, that's what we're going to do this week. So let's give some attention now to what it is we're creating with our thoughts. And And I'd like you all to turn your attention inward for a moment. You can close your eyes for this if you'd like. And just reflect for a moment on where your attention goes when you're not actively engaged in some specific mental focus. Maybe when you're alone, driving in your car, or taking a walk, or taking a break from work, or cooking dinner, or just in the shower, do you tend to dwell more on everything wrong in your life? You know, all the resentments and the past hurts and the future worries? Or do you fill your thoughts with what you love? Like the happy successes, the love that you've shared, the gratitude in the present, and the pleasant anticipation you might have around the future. If you looked at each thought going through your mind as a seed, destined to grow the events of your future, how do you feel about the quality of the seeds you're planting? Are they growing successes and joy and love? Or are they growing more bitterness and pain and disappointment? So you can open your eyes and come back from that. Now, most of us, if you noticed, oh my gosh, all my thoughts are about everything wrong, don't beat yourself up for that, because most of us have certain patterns of thought that are so habitual we're not even fully aware of them. These thoughts that pop into mind when we're not trying to think about anything generally reflect what we've learned early in life, before we had a choice in the matter, what just got programmed into us. And we may have learned habits of worry or of optimism. We may have learned faith, or we may have learned bitterness. And the areas of our lives that flow easily, it's not just coincidence. These areas reflect our positive automatic thoughts. These reflect areas of life that, somewhere early on we got taught to expect they'll go smoothly. On the other hand, we may tell ourselves many times a day, maybe that we're unsafe, or that life is unfair, or that we don't deserve to be happy. And we may be so unaware of this inner conversation that we don't even call these messages thought, we call them reality. And then what we believe to be reality is what we perpetuate again and again as our experience. Now, monitoring every random thought can be a pretty daunting task, because so much of it is just in the background. It's not even fully conscious. But a much more doable exercise that can powerfully affect thinking is to simply monitor what we say out loud. And I call this following exercise no whining. And I'm going to suggest you all practice it for at least a month. It really is very powerful. The first time I did it myself, I actually made a 3-month commitment to it. And I actually only lasted for 15 minutes before I almost broke my commitment and whined. I caught myself just in the nick of time, but it really did make me instantly aware of how automatic complaining can be. Interestingly, though, once I got the hang of not whining, I found my inner dialogue changing along with my spoken dialogue. I found it just wasn't as satisfying to whine to myself anymore. I just caught it and stopped it. And after practicing this for a few weeks, I noticed any number of things that I usually struggled with were falling into place with an ease that felt truly miraculous. I even achieved some things that had just seemed like closed doors to me for many years. It was really an amazing time. Now, it also forced me to find some different ways of sharing with my friends, different ways that weren't based on commiserating. You know, how many of you do that? You know, you get together with a friend, and the first thing you do is you share everything awful. Now, I didn't suddenly become, you know, an always smiling little Pollyanna, but when I did share what was going on in my life that was painful, I did it in a different way. I did it in a way that left me feeling more empowered afterward. And one thing I started doing is reaching out for help and not just sympathy. And what's more, this is really interesting, some of my friends shared with me later that their words and their inner thoughts started changing too. And they stopped whining back to me in response to my not whining back, for one thing. And they found that it started changing how they related to other people in their lives. And I found that this really enhanced the quality of my friendships. And it really did seem like it had an effect on my friends that they took with them way beyond our interaction. So, as a first step preparation for this new growing season, just to get ready for the manifesting work that we're going to do later in the season, your first assignment here is to practice this no whining exercise for a month. Now, the month time isn't to suggest you should begin whining again come April, you know. A month is a long enough time to break old habits and to set new ones in place. So the idea here is to use the exercise to start a new habit of thinking and speaking. Now, another aspect of the month commitment is that having a clear-cut start and finish date to the assignment really helps to strengthen the power of your word and the power of your intention and the power of your will in a way that just trying to do the exercise as well as you can for as long as you can until you forget about it doesn't touch. Every time you make a clear commitment to something and you keep your commitment, you really do strengthen your ability to make things happen in the way you intend them to. And we'll go more deeply into this in another lesson. But for now, just recognize that this exercise really is as much about strengthening your will and your intention as it is about changing your thinking. These two are both very important. So here's how it works. Here are the details. Starting now and continuing for 1 month, let go of all talk and all conversation in which you present yourself as an unfortunate victim of circumstances beyond your control. Now, if you slip and catch yourself in a whine, redirect it by acknowledging your own participation in bringing this situation about. And share what you're willing to do to change your experience. That's one way of turning it around. Or you can share what hidden lessons or hidden blessings you're receiving from this challenging experience. Maybe you will ask the person you're speaking to for help. And the help you ask for might be that of changing your situation or just help with changing your state of mind. You could just say, you know, ask your friend to tell you something funny to get you laughing. In other words, it's okay on this exercise to feel bad. It's okay to talk about it. But when you do speak as though this is an experience that you had some participation in creating, you have some power to change, and you're learning something from. And even if you don't believe this, you don't have to believe this. That's not part of the exercise. You don't have to believe it. Let me emphasize that. You don't have to believe it. even if you don't believe it, speak as though you do have power in your situation, because as you speak as if, it will help it to become so. Because the less you think and speak of yourself as a victim, the less you're going to find yourself falling into that role. Now, and we're going to talk a lot more about this as we go along here, but to up the effectiveness of this assignment, I'm inviting you to do it for a whole month in an absolute way, never slipping, never cheating even once, and to do it as a symbolic act, meaning you're going to give it added power by giving it a bigger significance. And you'll do that by telling yourself that if you are willing to absolutely change your speech in this way, then you can manifest anything, and anything is possible. You can manifest the highest good that you most desire. And again, even if you don't believe this, imagine that this is the truth. So that when you are tempted to cheat or slip a little bit, your question to yourself becomes, if my most heartfelt dreams coming to fruition depended upon me choosing not to complain about my life right now, what do I choose? What do I love more? Complaining about my life or having my heart's desire? And again, the total, absolute, never cheating, even once aspect of this assignment is important because it strengthens your focus and will, making whatever you set your mind to easier to accomplish. Now, if you do slip and whine, maybe you remember it later. Here's what you can do. You can either begin again, recommitting for a new 1 month period, or you can go back to the person you whined to. Maybe you whined in the morning and you remembered at night. You can go back to that person and actually have another conversation and change your old statement by turning it into a truer one. As with, you know how I was complaining to you today about, well, the truth is that I really have a lot of power to change the situation. I'm not a victim here, and I'm actually learning a lot from it. And the next time you catch me whining about it, would you do me the favor of reminding me of this? That would be an example of how you could actually go back and redo that conversation. Now, if you find that you just keep slipping and slipping and slipping, and you just can't get through a month of this, it may be that there's some part of you that isn't quite ready to move out of struggle. It might be that there's some payoff for you in not manifesting your dreams at this time. And again, this may sound like a crazy idea. You don't have to believe it. We're going to go a lot more deeply into this whole notion that there could be payoffs to remaining stuck at another lesson. But for right now, I want to just check in and see if anybody has any questions about this exercise. So, Bill, you want to unmute people?
All right, I've unmuted everyone, and it's kind of quiet. But if you notice some background noise and you're not speaking, feel free to mute yourself.
Did anybody have any questions about how to do it, what it means, anything at all?
I would like to ask something.
Want to say your name first?
Katalin?
Yeah. Go ahead, Katalin.
My question is, this is the same thing if I whine about somebody else, not my own issues, but somebody else. Why that person didn't do this, why this person did, or whatever.
Yeah, Katalin's question is, and let's mute everybody for a minute. Catalin's question, okay. Okay, I'm unmuted now. Catalin's question, really good question, is what if I'm whining about somebody else? Like what somebody else did? Yes, if you're whining, which is the idea of a whine, what I mean by a whine is that you're talking about a situation as though you are a victim in the scenario. So if you're talking about somebody's behavior in a way that, you know, it's important that you and another person need to deal with that person's behavior, and it's not judgment-based or victim-based, then I wouldn't call it a whine. But if you're just going on like, ugh, do you know what my husband did to me today? Like,
What?
Let me tell you what he did. And he does this all the time.
Don't.
And I'm always picking up his like, blah, blah, and he's always, that is a whine. And that would be something to reframe. You know, and a way to reframe this might be to look at that other person and your reaction to them. You know, if somebody is triggering a strong reaction in you, instead of whining about their behavior, what you could do is imagine that the way that person is treating you is somehow reflecting an expectation you have about life. You know, somewhere early in life you got taught that this is the kind of treatment that was coming to you, that you deserve it, that that's how people are, that that's how life is. And you can just look at what that might be showing you about your own inner expectations. And we'll work a little bit more with that at some point here too. But for now, you know, that's one way that you can always turn it back on yourself. So if you just need to talk about somebody else's behavior, as in, well, my house cleaner is here, and I need to tell my house cleaner, well, you know, Bill's dirty laundry is all over the house. I'm so sorry that you can't vacuum very well. That would be talking about his behavior without it being whining. If I go on and on like, oh, Bill always does this, it so drives me crazy, that would be me whining. Now, if it really triggers me, I could just look at, well, what part of me believes that I have to do all the work around the house of picking up the laundry? Who taught me that? How can I shift that belief? So that's what I mean by that. I'm going to unmute people again. I can't do that. You have to do that, Bill. Unmute everybody.
Okay.
Any other questions? Or comments or thoughts?
Hi, it's Anita here. I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what if somebody, like a colleague, whines to you about the workplace, and you know how you sometimes agree with them to make them feel a little bit better in the moment when they're upset? How do one handle that?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. Bill, do you want to mute everybody?
Sure.
So Anita's question is, what if somebody in the workplace whines to you about something? Well, you know, I would look for ways that you can give support without whining back. You know, it could be by just listening in a reflective way. It might be reflecting their feeling, like, wow, it just sounds like, you know, you're feeling really under a lot of pressure around that, or it sounds like this is really bothering you. And let them talk, and you don't have to whine back. You might get to a point where, you know, people generally don't enjoy advice. So anytime you get that finger wagging feeling where you want to say, now you shouldn't be whining about this, you know, that's just going to make more bad stuff come to you, cancel that thought. Instead, I would just, you know, be empathetic, you know, really feel feel from your heart maybe some of what they're going through, and recognize that, like, I hear you're going through a really hard time. And then you might want to turn it around and say, you know, is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything I can do to help you shift so it doesn't feel like so much pressure and such a burden? So that's what I would suggest, rather than going back into the automatic whining back mode. Now, I'm going to keep going with this. If you have more questions, just make a note of them, because I am going to open it up again later. So I definitely don't feel like there's no more time for questions.
And they can always type in a question, and then we'll park it until we open it up again.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we get to some of the rest of the content before it gets too late, and then we'll make sure I get to any question that's left. You know, this can be an exercise where it's helpful to have support. And I love that some of you are doing this course with a friend. That's a great thing, because this exercise is a really great one to do with a friend.
Oh, yeah.
And also, please use the online forum or the private Facebook group to share your experiences, to ask questions, to share how it's going, you know, to even share if you slip, to ask for suggestions of how to deal with this or that or this situation. There's a lot of support out there for those of you who are new. On the students' website, attached to every lesson, there's a place to leave comments and to respond to each other's comments. And that's a reason that we set up the private Miracles Course Facebook page. You can make any kind of comment that's not directly related to a lesson there. You can share anything you'd like there. So do use that resource to share and get support with this, because, you know, sometimes it takes a few slips before we start to recognize the habit and change it. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something else, because another important step in preparing for forward movement and for future growth is to take stock of what we've already accomplished. And this step, I think, is a really crucial one, because what we give attention to, we grow bigger, we amplify. Consciousness, as Erwin Schrödinger said, is a powerfully creative tool. And simply by holding something in mind, we give it creative energy. We start to call things into manifestation. And even scientists are realizing that experiment results have a way of reflecting the scientist's expectations, and that we can't observe something without changing it. So seeing the glass half empty or half full isn't just an overused definition of optimism and pessimism, it's actually a creative act. The more we focus on that half-empty glass, the more likely we are to drain the half glass we started with down to nothing. And the opposite holds equally true. By reviewing the positive growth of the past, we amplify our capacity to experience accomplishment in the future. Just in the same way that dismissing how far we've come keeps us perpetually in a state of having a long way to go. So I'd like you to turn your attention inward again. If you want, you can close your eyes. Just take a deep breath. And this time what I want you to do is reflect on the last year of your life. And notice as you look back, if it's easy to see an abundance of positive growth, is it easy to see accomplishment? Can you see forward movement? Just think about that for a moment. Because if it is, then your next step becomes easy. Instead of focusing on the hurdles you imagine lying ahead, imagine what your life might look like in another year of just as much growth. You know, if you've seen a year filled with growth and forward movement, just remember how you envisioned your future maybe a year ago. Were there blessings? Were there leaps forward that you didn't expect? And just imagine from this point what your life might look like with at least as many surprising turns for the better manifesting over the coming year. Don't try to plan or guess what they'll be. Just let yourself feel some excitement at the thought of how much you're likely to accomplish based on how much you've achieved this year. Maybe things you haven't even dreamed yet. Now, what if you look back and you don't see much positive growth? Or worse, it looks like you've taken a few steps backwards. Well, first and foremost, know that the interpretation you give to your experience is a creative act, and it has a tremendous impact on what you create next. So that if you feel that you've just stood still over the last year, consider that maybe you've stood still the way plants stand still. Think of that. Have you ever watched a plant grow? You can stare at it all day long and not see much happening. But that doesn't mean it isn't growing. Meaningful growth sometimes requires time to develop in a way that's strong and lasting. Even dramatic change that comes quickly sometimes requires time for us to be able to see it. In my career, I've worked a lot with healers and healing, and I've seen a lot of people release physical illnesses spontaneously just through spiritual work. And one was a woman who had attended some of my spiritual healing services. She shared that she had become free of a chronic asthmatic condition that she'd struggled with all of her life, and she let it go without even realizing it was gone until many months later. And it wasn't until she became aware one day of being in an environment that would typically have provoked an attack that she realized that she not only felt fine, but she hadn't had an attack in months and months. She didn't even notice the absence of her illness until it was long, long gone. And sometimes our expectations about how change happens won't allow us to accept or trust a change that happens too quickly or too easily. And our minds need time to grow into the change that we've already made. Well, so what if you just can't relate to the whole plant growth metaphor, and you really do believe that your life has been stuck in a pit of stalled movement? Well, there's still a bigger picture to be seen here. One that can provide momentum rather than inertia for your next season of growth. Just imagine all the ways that standing still is a powerful part of moving forward. Think about a seed lying dormant underground during the winter months, or a caterpillar motionless in its chrysalis. A seed growing in the wrong season wouldn't survive, and a half-formed butterfly emerging too soon would never survive either. Even though you may never see the bigger picture of why, consider that your still time was simply not the right season for forward momentum. And in the absence of visible change, ask yourself, what have I been incubating under the surface, out of sight? Keep asking until you get an answer, because there is one. And now, if you really think you've taken a step backward in your growth, consider how even backward movement can be a step in the right direction. Think of an archer pulling backward on a bow to create the momentum needed to propel an arrow, or a jumper taking steps backward before leaping. Think of how pruning a plant creates more lush growth. I remember a time when the harder I worked, the more my business fell apart, and I felt like a miserable failure. It was a horrible time of life, and I'd never choose to repeat it. But in retrospect, I wouldn't have wanted to skip it either, because I'm not sure that anything less dramatic would have gotten me to change directions and find the much different and better path that did ultimately allow me to excel and succeed. You know, there are ways that even the worst failures and losses and lapses and emotional and physical breakdowns provide opportunities. They may be helping us to develop new life priorities. They may be forcing us to grow new strengths, or to find our deep buried tenderness or vulnerability, maybe our receptivity. And all of this allows rigid patterns of living and thinking to crumble, so something more alive can grow. Sometimes we're just really stubborn, and we just have to get pummeled by life until we let go of what isn't working for us anymore. Sometimes that's our stubborn self-sufficiency that thinks we can do it all ourselves. As you appreciate the importance of what's fallen apart and acknowledge the things you've accomplished, you really do cultivate fertile ground for your next growing season. So just come back from that reflection a little bit. And this lesson ends with an exercise that it's really a good one to do in writing. And just because the process of writing often helps bring things to the surface that don't immediately come to mind. So those of you who are students will find the written version of this whole lesson online with this exercise in it. And for now, though, I'm just going to walk you through it. And again, it's about just reflecting on the last year of your life. And as you just go back into that place of looking at what's been since last spring, just ask yourself, what have been your most standout accomplishments of the last year? And again, I suggest that at a later time, you answer this question for yourself in writing, because I think you're going to have more and more calm as you put it down, pen to paper. And the second question I want you to think about is, if there have been significant failures, losses, or lack of momentum, how might this still reflect growth? And the third question is, what is the most significant life lesson you've learned over the last year? The next question is, what life lesson do you most need to learn? And then once you've been able to recognize the positive growth that's taken place over the last year, imagine where you might be if you grew at least as much in the coming year. So do a little pondering of those questions. You might be amazed at what comes if you really give yourself time to work with them. I'm going to unmute people in just a moment and let you share and ask more questions, but I want to just talk a little bit about the course. First, for any of you who are just auditing tonight, if you're thinking that you might still like to enroll, the early registration is over for this quarter, and late registration ends on the 10th of March. That's the very, very end of all deadlines. You can't get in until summer after that point. For any of you who are auditing tonight, if you did sign up for this class, even if you couldn't attend live and you're just seeing this recording, if you'd like to enroll in the spring quarter still, you can still enroll without having to pay the late fee. If you do so within the next 24 hours, we'd really like to have the whole student body assembled, sooner rather than later. So if you're still thinking about it and you've decided you would like to enroll, if you do so within the next 24 hours, you can do so at the early registration fee. You don't have to pay that extra late fee. Now, an important piece of this program that I was talking about earlier before we began is your individual session with Reverend Deb Taramani, Rev Deb we call her. She'll be leading 3 group classes in the course of the spring quarter, and the dates of those you'll find on the student calendar that's on the student website. And you've probably already received that from her in an email. But she also will schedule one private consultation with each enrolled student every quarter. And as I was saying, she's a true miracle maker. She manifests things very powerfully, and she will work with you to help you manifest, your goal, your heart's desire. Now, I'm telling you about this now because her availability for one-to-one sessions is also posted on the student calendar. And you'll want to get your session scheduled as soon as possible, because if everyone waits until the last month of the quarter to schedule your session, you're likely not to get one. Her time will fill up and there won't be any time. The quarter will be over and you will have missed it. So don't miss that opportunity. She really is quite special. Let's see. While it's not necessary to attend these classes live, because there are recordings, it's definitely ideal. So those of you who can attend live, please do. It's always great to have you. Why don't we unmute people now, Bill? I want to open it up at this point. Now, if you know you've got a lot of background noise, mute yourself until you want to speak. And you can do that by just muting your little microphone icon if you're online. If you're just on the phone, you can mute yourself by pressing *6. So I want to open it up for any questions you might have. Also, I want to just invite any of you who are returning students, if there's anything you want to share with new students about what this course has been like for you, feel free to jump in with that too. That might be just helpful to hear. So what have we got? Have we got anything left tonight?
Hi, Lynn. Can you hear me?
I can.
It's Pete?
It's Pete. Yeah, I just wanted to say how excited I am to be part of this, and how I'm looking forward to this spring quarter. I love what you're saying. I love your thoughts, and I love how wise you are, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm so happy to be here.
And so am I, Lynn. Me three.
Blessings.
Yeah. Great to have you guys.
I
I
wanted.
do have a question.
Who is this?
Yeah.
Just got in here. What life lesson do you most need to learn? And my question is, how are you defining life lesson?
I would say you can define it any way you like. Just ask yourself, what am I learning from this? See what you get. Might be you're learning patience, might be you're learning compassion, might be you're learning to be less stubborn, maybe you're learning to let other people help you. Those are some examples of life lessons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I was going to say, Lynn, that you and I'm going to commit to it. No whining for a month.
Except for this kind?
Whining for a month.
But that has been whining while we've been in session, the bad boy. I actually don't recommend that. I don't recommend alcohol mixed in these sessions. Afterward, maybe.
And I told my best friend that I was going to try the no whining for 1 month exercise. And 4 days later she says, so when do you start this?
Uh-oh. Who was that speaking?
That was Sam.
That's Sam. And I want to just get us all in a habit of saying our names before we speak, because some people are on the phone and can't see anything, and after a while we'll start to get to know each other's voices, I'm sure.
Hey, it's Brenda. Hello, can you hear me? Hey.
Yes.
I think it's perfect that this coincides with Lent, and so I don't usually give up anything. I try and do something constructive, as kind of a Lenten discipline, and this is perfect. And so I joke about it, but I'm totally honest about it. I'm giving up whining for Lent.
Very good.
It is very Lent-like, isn't it?
Yeah, and really the last few days since I read the lesson online, I have really been thinking a lot about it, and I logged on late and was surprised that I could connect online, but that's great. And I heard the discussion of kind of what constitutes a whine, and I've been thinking about that myself over the last few days. Well, okay, what's the difference between stating a fact and whining? Well, whining is going on and on and on, but if I just state a fact, like, well, the computer, this server got thrown off the network again, okay, let's see what we can do about it. That's a statement of fact.
Mm-hmm. And you can even state your feelings. You can state, I'm feeling really frustrated because my computer is malfunctioning. I'm really ready to shift this now, but done with it. As opposed to, this always happens to me. That would be a whine. Whining is where you really go into that victim place.
Yeah.
I have to do this at work too. I think Catherine can relate to that because she was in IT.
I hear more whining in my job as my fair share. So I have 21 doctors in my office and all whining. If they have to have one more stroke on a computer, they're whining. So I am doing my very best to get through the non-whining exercise.
And I've known people who have changed their whole toxic work environment by simply being different themselves. So, keep us posted. Might be really interesting what happens.
I have a comment. I'm going to unmute myself. So I
Okay.
can speak. Can you hear me? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
You can hear me. All right, excellent. So Yvette writes, "Hi everyone. I'm a returning student and I've got so much out of this no whining exercise last year. It was shocking to realize how often I was unconsciously whining, and now a year later I whine much less. Very empowering."
Great.
Wow, thanks, Yvette. Anyone else? Thoughts, questions, comments? Yes, who is this?
Hi, this is Alma. I wanted to say I like the idea of starting immediately about the no whining.
Yes.
But first, can I tell you about my neighbor?
Yes, you can demonstrate sharing in a very empowered way.
Seriously, I know this works because about 8 years ago, I had a horrible relationship with my oldest brother, and I would just rant about him to my friends. And finally, one day, I decided if I can't say anything good about him, just don't say anything at all, and just stop talking about him. And so I did. I made a conscious decision to stop talking about him. And I found that after a while, my feelings toward him became neutral. And I think that the talking, verbalizing, it just fuels our feelings. And it's like, continually feeling more fire. And the fire kind of goes out if we stop talking about it. And anyhow, I finally got to where I didn't have any ill feelings about him at all. And it's simply because I stopped talking about him. And I realized if I can't stop thinking about it, at least I can stop talking about it. And it took 3 years. I did not even talk to him for 3 years. And one day out of the blue, he calls me up like nothing's happened. And he wants to put all his checking accounts, his savings accounts, which he has many. He wanted to add my name to all of them, as a backup, which was shocking. Of this man, I thought he hated me. Anyway, that was the result of my consciously deciding I was not going to talk about my brother anymore.
Wow, very powerful story. Thank you, Alma.
Hi, this is Mary.
Hey, Mary.
My sister Rachel is extremely difficult to deal with. So for the past 2 or 3 years, I avoided her. Now she has cancer. And I volunteered to take her to her radiation treatment twice a week. I'm sister's taking her twice a week, and another sister's taking her another time. She just heaped nothing but abuse on all of us. So ungrateful. It is going to be the hardest thing in the world for me to not whine about her, because that's all I've been doing for the past month. And she's been diagnosed with cancer, because she is, like we said, she was a bitch. Now she's a bitch on steroids. I need all the love and support y'all can give me and my family to get through this.
Yeah.
And she is so mean. And I know, I'm whining.
You don't have to put a smile on your face and act as though you have no feelings. You can talk about how you feel. You can say you feel angry. You can say you feel hurt. You can say you feel sad. And you can talk to all your friends about your feelings. And instead of saying, she's so mean, she always does this to me, you might want to reframe that as, I'm feeling so hurt by this. I'm feeling so angry and so sad by this. I could really use some support right now. And then just stop and let the other person speak to you and see where it goes. And you know, I've seen an awful lot of transformation come from people using this really simple prayer that I got from someone who was just deeply depressed and nothing was working for her until she started doing this. She used this really simple prayer, I love and bless you. That's it. She didn't even say it out loud to somebody. She said it to herself. And she took it to work with her and started saying it to everybody in her very abusive, toxic work situation. I love and bless you. And miracle after miracle happened and things turned around. I've seen people have that happen in their family situations as well. So when you're not with her face to face, when you're not just in the trigger situation, you might want to just spend some time with that, because, you know, she's the one with cancer. She's got to be everything you're feeling and amplify that times 100.
I know.
You know?
I'm so mad at her because she wanted to be sick so she could get disability and not have to go to school and not have to work. She's happy that she's sick. She's happy she'll be getting disability probably. And it makes me so angry that she wished this upon herself.
And you know, here's another thing, and another way to go, and this isn't just for you, this is for any of us who are just feeling so angry with someone. The things that we most judge in another person invariably reflect what we least tolerate in ourselves. So someone who can be happy, and you know the truth is she's not happy. It's the best she thinks that she can get is more likely the truth. But someone who allows themselves to be a way that we don't allow ourselves to be is someone who's going to trigger our judgment. So, you know, that on some level there's anger at ourselves for ever being that way. So, you know, when we can't forgive another person, sometimes the place to start is by forgiving ourselves. And looking at, well, what is it I'm really judging in that person? How are they being that are just tripping my trigger? And just trust that you have some little kernel of that in yourself deep down. Start looking at that and saying, I forgive myself for that. I forgive you, Lynn, for being blah, blah, blah. I forgive you, Lynn, for all the ways that you are blah, blah, blah. And just shift your attention. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to let go of the other person, but all the time that you've shifted your attention to forgiving and loving yourself are minutes that you're not in anger and judgment and pain around somebody else. And that'll help you start to shift, to feel better. So I hear you, it's hard. I just, you know, if you're not enrolled in the course, who is this speaking?
Mary.
This is Mary. Yeah, I don't think you're enrolled in the course of, you know, you might want to think about
She is
Mary.
M-E-R-R.
Oh, that, I was thinking of, I'm sorry, we have two Marys. Of course you are, Mary.
And I have the other Mary writing.
I was thinking, you don't sound like Mary. Like that other Mary. You're that Mary.
The other Mary's written in and has something.
Yeah. Actually, the other Mary, I remember you talking about using that I love and bless you prayer one time and having some miracles show up. I won't share them, but I just remember you had miracles. You know, do use the forums for this. You know, ask for help, ask for prayers, you know, ask for love. Really let this be an opportunity to receive love, because, you know, I'm guessing that's a piece of what you don't allow yourself to get enough of in life, and this is a time to do it differently. Yeah. What was the written in comment, Bill?
So the other Mary.
She writes, sometimes I've found that when I would complain, there was a lot of anxiety and fear. And I was also experiencing the anxiety and fear. Can you address dealing with emotions involved with whining? You may have just done that, Lynn.
Whew, that's a big question, because there's so many different ways you can feel emotion related to whining. You know, some of what we just talked about, some of what I was talking about a little bit earlier, is that in any situation, what is Mary saying? In any situation that's triggering us, the situation is reflecting something about our core beliefs about life. Somebody early on taught us that this was just going to happen to us in life, that this is how we were going to get treated, that this is, you know, shit happens, whatever it is that we got taught early in life that is now reflecting in our tangible circumstances. So we can always look at it from that perspective and see what's it showing me, and how can I start to shift that inner experience. Now, later on in this course, we are going to work very specifically with emotions. And we're going to work on what we can do with emotions as they arise, that, you know, that when we have painful emotions, because stuffing emotions is never particularly healthy, and neither is aiming emotions at someone with the intention of hurting them. You know, like, gotcha, let me take my anger and go at you. That's not good either. So that's a really big topic for another time. But we will be getting into that. You know, there's just so many, we can change our thoughts, but then we have to learn how to release our emotions. And those two processes need to work hand in hand. We'll be getting more into that in this quarter.
Hi, this is Hema. I have a situation I want to just ask for your insight on. I have a live-in situation where I have other housemates, and one of my housemates is pretty sloppy in the kitchen, and he tends to leave things in the sink and messes on the counter and that kind of thing. So I confronted him last night, and he said I was complaining. So to be able to come across in a way that's effective without him taking effect from how I'm saying it is my challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to open it up to see if anybody else on this call has a suggestion for that. Because I know there's an awful lot of wisdom that isn't just me. How about some suggestions here? Oh, she was saying that she confronted her housemate who left a mess in the kitchen. And her housemate accused her of complaining. And she's wanting to know what would be an effective way to deal with a situation like that wouldn't be whining, wouldn't be complaining, that would be effective and empowered.
Is someone here?
Mm-hmm.
I would just suggest that she express how it impacts her and other housemates, so that the person can understand that their actions have consequences, but not do it in a blaming and shaming way. Just if she can do that without any charge, then the other person can see that their actions are impacting others. And then they go, oh. I don't think most people intentionally try and impact other people negatively, so that's my suggestion.
Mm-hmm. So you're suggesting to just say, you know, when you do this, this is how I feel. And my request is that you clean up after yourself. How do you feel about that?
It's taking away the blame and the shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And emphasizing the impact on the household.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The experience is if you have any anger behind it or any blaming or shaming, that's all the other person hears. They don't hear the message.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't care. He told me he doesn't care. So, you know, and of course, you know, like Lynn was saying earlier, my feelings are valid. You know, I mean, if I do have charge around it, and I have kind of waited for a long time before saying anything just to see if he would, you know, respond favorably on his own.
Well, you know, I have to say, having lived in a lot of group house situations earlier in my life, there are the messies and there are the neats. And, you know, it's very hard for one to change the other. So, you know, given that, I find in a housemate situation, it's good to have house rules that everybody buys into and agrees to, you know, maybe even with consequences, you know. Maybe a house meeting is in order to set ground rules.
Yeah, I tried that when I first moved in and nobody would have it.
Maybe you need to find another place to live. and you know, and you know, you can always take this outer situation, even if it feels like there's absolutely nothing I can do, I'm totally powerless in this situation, and look at it instead of from a victim perspective of look at what they're doing to me. Ask yourself, what part of me learned early on that this is okay? You know, who taught me that? What is that belief? And you know, we'll talk more about this as we go on in this semester, in this quarter. But one way to start shifting that is just to imagine, well, what would it feel like to live in a reality where I'm not the one who has to do extra work for everybody? Because if you find yourself in that situation in other areas of life, and it really starts to trigger you, you know, it's not just this one situation, but maybe it's a pattern. Then invariably, this is part of your learning in life. And it's probably hard to even imagine having people around you who put in as much investment as you do. So start to imagine, what would it feel like if there were people in your life who were as invested and as responsible? You might find that it's hard to even imagine that, and yet imagining it will be a very helpful first step to just creating some of the inner vibration of that'll attract a different quality of person into your life.
I like that. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we are starting to get a little late tonight. We don't usually run quite this long, but we have a big group, and I know there are a lot of questions. I do want to mention, any of you who haven't enrolled and you think you'd like to, I'd love to have you join us. You have 24 hours to enroll without having to pay the late fee. The absolute cutoff for this quarter is March 10th. If you enroll within the next 24 hours, you can waive the $20 late fee. If you're not using a headset for next week, really invest in one, because that makes the sound quality so much better. You'll want to have paper and pen handy for these. Sometimes you won't need it, but a lot of times you will. Just have that be a given. And usually the recordings are available by the next morning on the Facebook page or the Facebook group. They're available on the students' website by Sunday. Now, for any of you who are enrolled students who haven't joined the Facebook page, all you have to do is send me a friend request, and then I can invite you into the group. Then you're in. And it's a really cool place where you can just share with students in any way. It might be, you know, I need prayers or healing for blah, blah, blah this week. Or here's a really cool little video I saw or something I want to share. Or I almost whined today, I need support. You can do anything you want on that Facebook page.
Rev Deb is really active there.
Yeah, and Rev Deb will get your prayer requests there. And Reverend Sandy too. So I think that's all I can think of for now. Anything left before we say goodnight?
Just a quick question, Mrs. Hema. Are we
Yeah.
supposed to do the lesson before the call, or is the call first and then the lesson, the homework follows?
You know, nobody has ever asked me that question, and you can do it any way you want. Just see what works best for you. These sessions will more or less follow the lessons, not always. And sometimes, we won't be able to fit everything that's in the written lesson here. So, whatever you like to do is fine. Anything else? Oh, if you can attend live every week, that's fine. There will be recordings. Next week, it's particularly important to attend live. So if you can, please attend live for that next session. It'll be a really, really important one. So it was lovely to be with you all. And I haven't got any more for tonight except to say I love you all and have a great week. Namaste, everybody.
Thank you. Namaste.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Namaste. Thanks. Love you.
Bye-bye.